The home, the consequences of having an unfaithful spouse. Entering the ballroom, Aaron parked his blue midnight vehicle in the spot designated for visiting academics. He arrived late, as usual. He had returned to the docks and was hanging out with the locals and tossing darts at one of those little dive bars. He was running late for work, and his wife, Stacy, who was competing to be a full professor here at Papali's University, had called to let him know. As usual, she seemed genuinely angry that he had missed the dinner gala's opening speech. "We'll cover for you, as usual," she'd responded, her voice seeming genuinely irate. Bob and I, that is, would fill in for him. Bob was a Robert Ph.D. doctor. He had been Aaron's closest buddy since they were little. With the exception of the 5 years that Bob spent in graduate school and Aaron spent in the military, the two men had always been close and involved in each other's lives. In addition, they had many of the same objectives. The one interest they had in common was archaeology. Despite their shared affection for music, they approached it in rather different ways. Bob was a scholar who valued documentation, charts, and study. He would investigate a subject for months in a library, hoping to learn everything there was to know. Then he would search for it. Aaron, on the other hand, simply enjoyed going outside and exploring. He was both a climber and a diver. If he believed there could be something intriguing hiding anywhere on Earth, he would travel there. Their personalities were as dissimilar as their approaches, despite their closeness as siblings. Aaron liked people more than books, computers, and charts. Robert's often haughty and condescending demeanor turned off a lot of people, whereas Aaron could walk into a room full of strangers and come out with numerous lifetime friends. Both he and the others around him drew closer. This was a really useful quality to have, as the locals would frequently tell him stuff that he couldn't find in books or online. Frequently, Robert and Aaron would go to a remote town in pursuit of a peculiarity or historical relic, only to encounter an impasse. Until a mechanic or bartender revealed to Aaron the location of the actual incident and the veracity of the local lore, Robert would become discouraged and consider giving up. Robert would eventually write a paper about it and get it published. The two were an extremely productive combination as a consequence. Even though Robert was the more well-known, he had to acknowledge that Aaron was mostly to blame for his notoriety. Archaeological explorers were challenged by Papali's University. Ancient Greek artifacts have been found in this region of the planet every time the Earth has settled differently. Staff at the university understood that genuine Greek or Roman artifacts may fetch high prices from museums throughout the globe. The institution was partially supported by the Greek government, thus obtaining the approvals and documentation required to sell or lease the relic wasn't insurmountable. Aaron only wanted the opportunity to explore and be compensated for it, whereas Robert had his sights set on a full professorship at the institution. They had been here around a week prior to get a feel for the terrain. The museum had invited all the treasure hunters to the gala tonight so they could learn what was going on. Robert reviewed what he knew about Greek history with trepidation throughout the week. He had desired to be ready to respond to inquiries on any topic that may come up. He had invited Aaron to study with him, but his friend had laughed it off. "Why would I even begin to think that I know more about Greek artifacts or Greek history than the Greeks do?" said Aaron. Throughout the week, Aaron made new friends in the town and on the campus. In particular, he was frequently in the vicinity of the marina and the shipyards. Stacy had gone shopping and tanning over the week. With a hasty step, Aaron headed into the dining hall, fumbling with his tie. He was stopped at the door by a stunning young woman who grinned at him. "May I?" she inquired, gesturing to his necktie. Aaron nodded and grinned in return. In a flash, the woman knotted his tie in a gorgeous way that Aaron could never have done. Aaron was not known for his subtlety, standing at 6'4" and 220 pounds, yet he appeared to be loved by everyone. The woman saw the whole scene as she stood back to admire her job. Aaron got a thumbs up from her and she responded, "Go get him, cowboy." Aaron remained silent for a while. This woman had a certain quality about her. In addition to her attractiveness, she gave off an air of assurance that belied her years. Her words, "I'm older than you think, cowboy," came out as though she could read his mind. With a smile on his face, he questioned, "Why do you call me cowboy?" "First, because that's what I sense about you," she chuckled. "You possess the strength and integrity of the old-time cowboys. There's a horse in front of your automobile. Upon gazing upon you, my senses declare, cowboy." She gave him another glance. "I really like you, Aaron. You will experience good things on my islands. However, there will also be some melancholy. Cowboy, don't look so weird. You yourself are no stranger to magic." Aaron nodded. He firmly believed that someone or something was watching out for him. With a smile, she said, besides, turning to go, "Your boots just give it away, don't they?" Aaron cast his gaze downward. Upon donning the outfit, he realized that he had neglected to put on his everyday shoes. His black western boots were even more cozy. He was not sure if anyone would notice. He headed into the banquet area. The room was filled with people. He had previously met a good number of them the week before. Glancing around, he talked to several of them, offering compliments. He bumped into the university's dean, with whom he had played golf the day before and suffered a crushing defeat. Aaron remarked, "Hey Marty," to Dean Reinhardt. Although Aaron continued to find it amusing that a German was the dean of a Greek institution, the globe was growing smaller all the time. "Hey Aaron," the dean answered. "I'd say you're a bit late, but it doesn't really matter, you haven't missed anything. I'm still having trouble moving around from that time you gave me yesterday on the golf course." Aaron laughed. Laughing, the dean presented Aaron to his spouse. That also caught Aaron's attention. Greek beauty with black hair was the wife of the dean. Compared to the over 50-year-old dean, she was considerably younger. It was also her who had adjusted Aaron's necktie. The dean said, "Your wife and your partner are around here somewhere. She's pretty, he's an insufferable guy. But he's a very smart, insufferable guy, Dean," Aaron said. Excusing himself, Aaron went to find Stacy and Bob. He made his way around the hall, trying to find Bob's scrawny body and bald head or Stacy's blonde hair and trim figure. He didn't find either. He wished he hadn't, but he found both of them when he stepped out onto one of the balconies to get some fresh air. "Wow, I guess he likes that a lot more than I do," Aaron said. "However, as they say, to each his own. And you're all his from now on. I don't want to talk to you two anymore. While you're at it, Stacy, you ought to try playing with his balls. It's said that it can swiftly get him off. In this manner, you may leave the remainder for later and return inside before any university employee discovers what a whore you are." As soon as possible, Stacy jumped to his feet and hurried away from Bob, who was trying to zip up his pants when he got uncomfortably trapped in the zipper. "It's not what it looked like, honey," Bob cried out in agony, and Stacy foolishly said as he did. Aaron raised a hand and whispered, "Wait. It takes me a bit longer to figure these things out since I'm not as brilliant as the two of you. It appeared to me that you are now assisting him. So please, tell me what was actually going on." Stacy simply had a dumb appearance. It was rare for such an educated woman, who could speak more than one language and give lectures on a wide range of topics, to be bored. Robert was attempting to stay still. He was stooped down, attempting to get away, but his zipper was stuck loose. Pain followed every step he made. Aaron walked up to face him and gave him a punch to the mouth that knocked him unconscious. Aaron turned around to face his stunned spouse. He said to her, "Please don't come back to the villa for about an hour. That way I can get my stuff and be gone by the time you two lovebirds get there." "Aaron, we really need to talk about this," Stacy harped. "I'm not to blame. He has spent months making advances on me. This has to be discussed right now. Postponing it won't make the task any simpler." "Huh," Aaron murmured. "Stacy, which 3 or 4 languages do you speak? You've probably mastered the art of saying no in at least one of them. Furthermore, we have nothing to discuss. Robert and you share a great deal in common. You are both extremely intelligent and well-educated. Compared to me, you two have a lot more in common. With all of those smart people, you would think that one of you could have just told me. It wouldn't have needed to be this way, and I would have wished you both the best. It makes sense, really. You two are almost geniuses, and me, all I am is a depressed former military man who enjoys diving and looking for trash. Perhaps we might have remained friends if you had handled it properly." With haste, Aaron grabbed Stacy's arm and yanked off her wedding rings. He shoved her away as she tried to hug him and clutched at him. "Please say no, honey. It was a mistake. Don't do this," Stacy sobbed. "I adore you, Aaron. Allow me to clarify." As Aaron turned to depart, he noticed that at least 1/3 of the visitors were observing the situation. He gave them a grin before navigating the throng and exiting the dinner hall. Driving through the winding lanes, he made his way back to the property they had leased. He hurriedly packed his car's trunk and rear with all of his personal belongings and clothes. He then relocated his equipment and diving gear to the garage so that he could get it more easily without having to enter the house later. He spent some time driving across the streets. His cell phone kept ringing. Stacy gave him many calls that night. Neither Robert's nor her calls were answered by him. In order to console him following the awkward incident at the banquet, he did converse with a couple of his new acquaintances. But Robert pulled a particularly pathetic ruse. It seems that after talking to his mother, she gave Aaron a call. Aaron had become close to Robert's mother after the death of his own. It made obvious that they would share a mother because the two of them were almost brothers anyhow. Aaron said into the phone, "Hello Ella. In a few days, may I give you a call? I'm not going to be a very good conversationalist at this time. I just wanted to say that, although I'm sorry you and Bobby are having disagreements, you two really need to get down and work things out." Ella said, "You two always do that." "Ella, I don't see that as being possible this time," Aaron said. "I think we're done. I don't see a way around this one." Ella spoke a solemn "Okay, since you and Aaron are like sons to me, allow me to attempt to clarify. It's just a vehicle." Aaron questioned, "Ella, what are you talking about? I assume that Bobby must have scratched the car if you're so mad with him." Ella responded, "Or please don't tell me he wrecked it." "Ella, I caught Bob with Stacy, in public, at a banquet we went to for the university we're trying to work for." On the phone line, there was quiet. Aaron then shattered it. "Ella, I'll call you in a few days." A few seconds later, Aaron received his next call. Since he couldn't identify the number, he decided it was okay to answer. It was a deep feminine voice asking, "How are you feeling?" "It's just fine," Aaron answered. "My spouse was correct regarding your acquaintance. He's a very annoying ass. But this crap is weaker than you. I sense that everything will work out for you." "Thank you," Aaron uttered. Aaron felt defeated by the evening's events. He was in the vicinity of the piers. It is likely that he was drawn to this location since he had spent the whole previous week getting to know the area. He began searching for a hotel or motel. He discovered one that wasn't too bad looking. The large vacancy sign that was always flashing was its most alluring feature. It was clear that the motel was intended to be a pirate-themed lodge. An enormous, deadly dog hanging ship was shown on a large sign in front of the building. The intended text on the sign was to read Hanging Dog Hotel in vivid orange neon. The neon letters I, N, and G had faded over time, and the sign now seemed to read Hang Dog Hotel. The structure was a large U form, with a pool and a sitting space inside the U still. Having a pool at a motel this close to the ocean didn't seem particularly sensible. When swimming in the sea is an option, why would anyone choose to swim in chlorinated water? That would only make sense for extremely young or extremely old people. Shaking his head, Aaron made his way to the main desk. His credit card was taken by a middle-aged Greek woman, who then swiped it. She handed him a key, and he signed the register. The second story contained his room. There was a pool view from his balcony. He could tell that the pool was probably out of commission even in the dark. Aaron's room was approached by the bellboy, a Greek youth who appeared to be around 15 years old, at most. Considering that he had already hauled his own baggage, Aaron questioned why he had bothered. After turning down the bed, the child approached Aaron and held out his hand. The youngster was scrawny and looked awful in his outfit. His slacks, like those of kids everywhere, sagged till you could see below the top of his underwear, and his shirt was rumpled and loose. His face was filthy and his hair really needed to be clipped. The lad, however, had his back rigidly straight, his knees firmly locked together, and he extended his hand toward Aaron with the air of an English butler. Aaron handed him a $5 cash for asking for a tip even though the image was so out of place. All that made Aaron happy that evening was the bellboy's close panhandling. Aaron fell completely clothed into his bed, covering the covers. After turning out the lights, he attempted to make sense of this particular chapter in his life. He was taken by surprise. That in and of itself was remarkable. He was the type of man who could sense a storm at sea before it was even a blip on the radar screens of the Meteorological Service. Additionally, he was able to predict when to sell the companies he had invested in months before they declined. However, he had not anticipated this. In all honesty, he hadn't been searching for it either. Who in the world was he meant to be able to trust the most, after all? The guy he had grown up with and regarded like a brother, and the lady who had vowed to be true and love him for the rest of their life, were the two people he expected to have his back more than anybody else on the earth. He never would have imagined that one of them would turn on him. It took the wind out of his sails when it turned out to be the two of them. It's possible that he thought Stacy would get tired of him and eventually cheat on him. However, he had always assumed that his friend Bob would be there to support him in getting over it if she did. Alternatively, if he and Bob's relationship failed, he would at least have his wife to console him. However, it was heartbreaking to lose them both at the same moment. Aaron needed to ponder for a long time. Ultimately, Bob had suggested that they visit this place, and Stacy had embraced the notion wholeheartedly. But then you realized that perhaps they had already been dating at that point. But since the two of them were operating against each other, Aaron wasn't sure about that. The sole professorship up for grabs was what they both want. Bob may have believed that he would make Stacy his assistant if he succeeded. Additionally, Aaron was certain that Stacy believed she would be awarded the professorship and that Bob and Aaron would be able to serve as field researchers for the institution. Well, Aaron no longer gave a damn about what people thought or desired. Fuck them both. Perhaps he should just return to the United States of America. Tomorrow, he would consider shipping his automobile back home. Subsequently, Aaron nodded off. When Dr. Maria Claridge opened her eyes, she surveyed her dorm room. She was alone because her roommate had already departed. The sound that had woken her up again was then heard by her. It was her mobile phone. At this early hour of the morning, who would be phoning her? Miss Claridge, a voice on the phone questioned. Or perhaps I should say Dr. Claridge. Yes, Maria said in a clean, accurate English accent. As she talked, she adjusted the spectacles on her nose. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I've been told that you've been fired from your teaching assistant post and might be interested in another position. Would you be interested in something that might be perhaps eventually a better one? Who is this? Maria inquired. I'm sorry, I thought that you'd recognized my voice. This is Alina Reinhardt. Maria jerked awake. The dean's wife was Alina Reinhardt. This was no laughing matter. Yes, ma'am, she said. Great, perhaps we can discuss this over lunch, replied Alina. After giving Maria the time and place, she hung up. Maria grinned. It had been a few days since she had been truly joyful. It may turn out that she does not need to return to England. After getting out of the shower, Stacy Anderson examined herself in the mirror. What she saw did not please her. Her face had wrinkles that weren't there the day before. Most likely, it was just nerves. All right, jitters from guilt. She was a wise woman who never imagined finding herself in this situation. Aaron was consistently running late for anything that even slightly suggested being respectable. How could she have known that he would arrive at the gala last night, even if he was fashionably late? It was very unusual of him to be even somewhat punctual. He hadn't returned to the property at all the previous evening. God, where had he gone? She had meant to give him some time to calm down and do a few spins in that automobile of his. She assumed he would arrive then and likely spend some time sleeping in one of the other bedrooms. She was aware that he would ultimately forgive her, even if it would probably take some time. She'd seen couples come through considerably worse, but she figured he wouldn't trust her for a very long time. In truth, so had her own parents. For years, her father had been unfaithful to her mother. Her mother then went on to have her own affair thereafter. Even yet, they were able to remain together until her father's cancerous death. All she had to do was speak with Aaron. Not that she'd really had an affair. For the previous week, she had been flirting with Bob in an attempt to persuade him to grant her the position, or at the very least list her as a member of their squad so she may be considered for it. Bob had taken on a new research assistant, a young English lady who had been fired from her job as a teaching assistant. She was one of those geeky types that dressed in loose-fitting clothing and thick spectacles. As a member of the team, Stacy would have the opportunity to apply for the professorship. If all went according to plan, she would be the professor and Bob and Aaron would continue as treasure seekers and explorers. She had more teaching experience than Bob, despite the fact that they both held doctorates. Bob, on the other hand, only ever conducted study and went over documents. He never had any field experience. Aaron went out and completed the majority of the fieldwork alone. His favorite activities were diving, digging, and climbing. Together, the three of them would be extremely strong. All that was required was for the team to be reorganized such that 3 members, rather than 2, completed each task. Stacy wasn't attempting to dismantle the guys' club, she was just wanting to get inside. They would be ideal in her opinion. Bob would investigate and determine what their objectives were. After Aaron went to acquire it, Stacy would give a lesson and a lecture on it. That would have been ideal. It was all messed up now, but it truly would have been. Not only was the team disbanded, but Stacy's marriage to a guy she happened to love and who had always been kind to her was also in danger. The 2 men's lifetime friendship had likewise been shattered by her. Aaron had vanished from her sight. The fact that he hadn't appeared still astounded her. The fact that Robert genuinely believed they were having a romantic relationship astounded her even more. It seems that he believed her thank you for firing the bimbo outburst to be the start of a romantic connection. There was nothing more false than that. Robert was no match for her spouse in any way. He was not as attractive. She didn't like him nearly as much and he didn't stimulate her in any way. They shared nothing at all, other than on an intellectual level. For him to even consider that, he had to be insane. Following his visit to the hospital, when the physicians had anesthetized Bob's penis so they could extract it via the zipper, he had become accustomed to using the pronoun we in all of his conversations. He had questioned, "What are we going to do?" Bob had always treated her as one of his pupils, so did he not realize that there was no we and wondered how we were going to manage this? He had shown her no regard up until now. The ironic thing was that the one man who had previously treated her fairly and valued both her physical and mental attributes no longer desired a relationship with her. She had to leave the event with her head down, which only made matters worse. Her walk of shame, in and of itself, had almost killed her. After that, none of the individuals who had witnessed them would regard them with much respect. The dean's wife's response had been particularly incriminating. The seductive, dark-haired woman had gazed at Stacy with the ability to see right through her to her innermost desires. Alina Reinhardt had given her a pitying expression in her eyes. She was questioned by Stacy whether she knew where Aaron had disappeared. Not only had Stacy asked the embarrassing question to break the awkward silence, but she also wanted to create the idea that she meant to track down her husband and make amends. Though most women were, Stacy was aware that those Greek women were reputed to be highly focused on their families. Alina grinned as she replied, "Don't worry about him. He'll be just fine. I'll see to it." After turning to face Stacy once again, Stacy had shivered remembering the woman's tone and attitude. Now that she thinks about it, she needed to locate Aaron. Doing it shouldn't be that difficult. His automobile should be the protruding feature of the whole thing. On a tiny island, how many cars could there possibly be? After drying off, Stacy began putting on her clothes. She pulled on cargo shorts and a top with a floral design. She also intended to don her best pair of sneakers. Her calves were accentuated by the high wedge heel of theirs. Tall and thin was Stacy. She had a body that was attractive in a bikini. Her waist was flat, and she had long, skinny legs. Her greatest features were definitely her blue eyes and her extremely light blonde hair that had been bleached by the sun. She'd struck him with her baby blue eyes and pouted a bit, but Aaron had never been able to refuse her anything. A knock on the door interrupted her as she was about to put on her shoes. Thinking it may be Aaron, Stacy limped up to answer it, one shoe on and the other in her hand. Robert leaned over the door or stood upright. He said, "Hello, sweetheart." His voice was emotionless and lifeless. "I would have been here earlier, but I had to wait for the painkillers to kick in. I didn't want to call because I didn't know whether your husband had come back or not. I can see that he hasn't. I can tell that because his other wife isn't parked in the driveway. So, Bob, what do you want?" Stacy inquired. "Oh, don't be upset, Angel. I know that this isn't the way that you wanted this to happen. To tell you the truth, this isn't what I wanted either. I really want to avoid hurting Aaron. After all, he is my best friend and partner. But I guess the attraction between us was just too strong. Anyway, I'm sure we'll pull all of this back together in time to get out there and find ourselves a chunk of history. After all, this is business and we're all professionals. In fact, that's why I came. You came here to suggest that we bury the hatchet and let bygones be bygones, said Stacy. No, I came here because we have a meeting to go to over at the university to discuss the amount of support they'll give us and what they want us to do, said Robert. If Aaron's not back, the two of us will have to go alone. He's usually bored at these things anyway. My whole face is swollen up and my jaw hurts every time I speak. It's going to be an awkward meeting. It dawned on Stacy that she would have to go to the meeting. She was tired of being Aaron's wife and wanted to be regarded as a member of the team. She would be perceived as a real participant in this if she attended the meeting and expressed herself. Thus, rather of pursuing her husband as she had intended, Stacy trailed Robert to his vehicle. Maria was giddy with anticipation. She was in disbelief that she was experiencing this. She had anticipated receiving an offer from Alina to work as a teaching assistant or even as a gopher on one of the excursions. Since she had absolutely no prior field expertise, she would have rather enjoyed the gopher position. The top researcher was not only a dream, but an absolute fantasy, while the research assistant was completely out of her grasp. She would naturally need to convince her prospective partner of the notion. She was uncertain about his condition, based on Alina's account of his life during the last 24 hours, but time was of the essence. Maria felt certain she could manage it. She had 4 brothers, and she had supported 2 of them through some difficult breakups. They shared something else as well. Just a few days after she had lost her teaching assistant position, his old colleague had recruited her as a research assistant and then dismissed her before she had even begun working for him. Therefore, they weren't really pleased with Dr. Thompson. After working for Professor Dilworth for a semester and a half, she had been let go. It had all been his fault. In honor of a regional holiday, he had made the decision to treat his employees to supper at a classy restaurant. Because of the restaurant's dress rule, Maria was unable to wear her loose outfit. She had on a lovely, loose-fitting sack dress that covered up her shape without being too tight. Maria had received a lot of unwelcome attention. Some males assumed that she was out for grabs because of her physique. She received much too much unwelcome attention because of her huge front. They appeared much bigger than they actually were because of her narrow waist. She dressed in loose apparel to give the impression that she was simply overweight. Maria could use contact lenses as well, but the big ugly spectacles only served to detract from her attractiveness. Her longish, wavy, honey-colored hair was constantly pulled back in a tight bun that gave the impression that the lady was considerably older. He gathered all of his employees 2 weeks later and fired them all. Maria initially believed it was aimed at her, but later learned that he had fired every employee. He had fired both of the ladies and the males. That calmed her down and encouraged her to believe it was only a cost-cutting measure. Maria discovered that she was the only one who hadn't been asked back to work for the professor a few weeks after the layoff. Less than a week had passed since their layoffs, for the others as well. The job as Dr. Thompson's research assistant had then arrived. Maria recently learned that Thompson had reassigned her job to a different lady, with whom he was allegedly having an affair. Well, he had always had that snatchy appearance. Maria crept to the back of the conference room, where she took notes and meticulously documented every word that was uttered. Alina had informed her that their proposal for funds and resources from the museum would need them to submit their study and a location, and that her new partner would likely be unwell for a few days. They would only have 4 days to complete their study and submit their proposal. 4 teams would be funded by the dean. At least a dozen teams were present. A few of them have a reputation for exploring the entire globe in search of items. In the field, Thompson and Anderson were well regarded. Maria questioned how precisely this would function. She could still wind up on their squad, after all. Alina had indicated that as one of the scenarios that may occur. That Tina would cooperate and move past their differences. In that scenario, she would most likely serve as Anderson's assistant. Thompson would be the other lady, whomever she was. She noticed Thompson and a woman at his side as she turned to glance around, but she saw nothing of Anderson. Not that she was aware of his appearance. All Alina had said to her was his size and good looks. After the meeting, Maria gave Thompson a kind nod and departed with her notes. She had to locate a new partner and begin their bid as soon as possible. Alina had informed her that he had rented a property near the university with his spouse. That's where she chose to begin. After the meeting, she arrived around an hour later after securing a ride with a buddy. She approached the door and gave it a knock. After a little while, she knocked once more. Not that its current tenants have anything to do with the villa's excellent condition. It was to be expected that there were certain parts that needed some TLC. One thing Maria was looking forward to was having her own place. She desired everything. She aspired to balance a prosperous profession with a family and a house. Although her job was improving, she had not yet met a man who genuinely piqued her attention. She had experienced a great deal of first dates, but not many second or third dates at all. She wasn't quite pure or anything. However, she seems to attract the eccentrics. Since they didn't think she was gorgeous in her regular working attire, they were all first her non-physical friends. However, all of the non-physical friendships and their interest in her vanished as soon as she showed them that she was interested in them and that she was actually built like. At last, a female approached the door. It was odd that she appeared to recognize Maria, considering Maria had no memory of ever having met her. Then something snapped in her thoughts. It was she who had accompanied Dr. Thompson to the conference. The woman said, "Can I help you?" She was probably getting up to 40 years old, and although attractive for her age, she didn't look right at the moment. She was slim and tall, nor was she burdened by Maria's physique. To be constructed that way would have killed Maria. "If you're looking for Robert, he doesn't live here and you won't find him here. I had nothing to do with him letting you go," the lady said. She found it difficult to meet Maria's gaze. Maria happily replied, "Actually, I was looking for Mr. Anderson." "Is he here?" the woman questioned. "No, he isn't. And why would you be looking for my husband?" Maria had already made up her mind not to like her. "Business," Maria remarked as she turned to walk away. "What sort of company?" I asked Stacy, who seemed to be becoming angrier by the moment. "None," Maria said. "What in the world does that signify?" "Talk in English," the woman urged. Maria said, "It means that my reasons are none of your business. Have a really nice day." Feeling like a complete idiot, she walked away and got back in her friend's waiting car, and they drove off. Why the hell did she go to his house? She knew she would have to look for him somewhere, but where? Alina had told her that Anderson and his wife were having a fight. When Maria called Alina, she asked where she could possibly find Mr. Anderson. After giving it some thought, Alina said that the island was not very big, so there weren't many places he could hide, and that he was probably hiding somewhere. "You start looking for hotels and look for his car. He drives this loud, sporty American car with the horse on the front." Alina promised to check on it too and to call her back. Maria thought Alina Reinhardt was strange, even though she didn't look much older than her. Her mannerisms frequently suggested a much older woman. Maria fingered the necklace absent-mindedly that Alina had given her when they first met, and what was even stranger was that the woman had made her swear she wouldn't take it off as long as she was in the area. How regressive could the wife of a university dean be? Well, Maria liked Alina and she'd given her word, so she wore the necklace because it was attractive. "It will protect you," Alina claimed. To Maria, it smelt of witchcraft and old-world ideas. Alina contacted her back after almost 4 hours, saying, "Even for me, it took some time to find him. It seems like everyone here already adores that dude. He has a room at the Hanging Dog Hotel down near the harbor. You need to find him fast if you want to get on the team," Alina added, explaining what had transpired and advising Maria to keep it to herself. "He's definitely hurting over what happened at the gala. I've been told that Thompson will have the team's bid ready in a matter of days. You may still go out with them if you're not signed on before then, but it will just be as a crew member and you won't receive any recognition for it. And that's what I want for you." After borrowing the friend's car, Maria drove to the harbor, asked around for directions to the Hanging Dog, realized that the Hang Dog was the local term for the hanging dog, and checked into the hotel, which was smaller than she had anticipated and a little run down. When she arrived, it was about 8 p.m., and it was just beginning to get dark. The sight of the sun setting and the moon rising over the sea was truly breathtaking. If Maria had more time, she would love to simply take off her shoes and stroll along the beach. Unlike in her dreams, she would be strolling alone, but a stroll along the ocean front was a stroll along the ocean front, and whether she was with someone or not, it would still be a very special memory to cherish someday. While seated at the pub, Maria repelled a few of the petty locals who believed they could easily win her over, make her forget her underwear, and send her to the poor home in just one evening. "Oh my God, gorgeous lady, your accent is so amazing," said a wonderfully inspired Lothario. "Look, Romeo, get the hell away from me," Maria yelled, her smile becoming larger. "If you don't just turn around and leave, I'll scream help at the top of my goddamn lungs." She continued to smile, speaking in a volume only he could hear. "I apologize," he added, raising his voice just enough for those nearby to hear. "I had no idea you were a lesbian." After that conversation, Maria was largely left alone, though a few ladies did approach her to sit close by, but none of them took any action. There had been a few musicians who played a song or two during the evening. Some played gypsy-type music. Others went for the traditional Greek genre, and nearly all were met with a smattering of applause and a lot of disinterest. Maria had started to feel that Alina had led her on a wild goose chase. After all, what would a famous explorer be doing in a place like this? Everywhere she looked there were the gigolos and a few whores plying their trade on the few tourists who'd ventured this far off from the typical tourist haunts. Maria was just about to head out when it happened. She'd had more beer than usual and had decided she would return to the dorm to relieve herself when a large man with well over 6 feet of height came down the back staircase. He was smiling, but his eyes had a sadness in them that was unlike anything Maria had ever seen. If there was anything beautiful about this man, it was his dirty blonde hair and eyes that were as deep blue as the ocean outside. The odd thing was that even though he seemed to be liked and embraced by all of the locals, he didn't seem like one of them. He didn't look Greek, he looked American. He staggered into the bar area as if he was a little inebriated. he was received with a wave of catcalls. He sat down in front of the bar and someone slapped him on the back and pushed a drink down next to him. It wasn't one of the tourist drinks, or even the bottled liquor the bar served. It was in a pot or jar and looked like some kind of Greek homebrew, which made Maria smile. He looked at it, sniffed it, and threw back his head, his eyes getting big. The crowd erupted in laughter, and Maria couldn't help but laugh along with them. For some reason, she wanted to enjoy the man just as much as everyone else in the room. "Wow," he remarked in a loud voice. "That'll put hair on your chest." "Sing one, Andy," came from behind. Now that Maria knew, the man's name was Andy, or something like that. The man was given a guitar that appeared to have seen better days. He adjusted the tuning pegs a little, then strummed it again, tapping the back of the instrument. The crowd roared again. "I think I've got the perfect song for this place and this crowd," he said, leaving Maria transfixed. Despite her intense need to urinate, she was unable to leave, and she secretly hoped that the man couldn't sing. The hanging dog had been interesting, but it was a dead end, so she'd go back to Alina for another tip tomorrow. Of course, Maria could go ask for the guest list, or even knock on some of the doors. She'd try all of that tomorrow after taking care of her bladder and getting a good night's sleep to get rid of the alcohol she'd consumed. Aaron Anderson had better be worth the trouble it was taking to find him. The man began to sing, and his deep baritone voice made him seem really good in a peculiar way. Rather than sounding like a rock star or a fantastic jazz player, he sang more like a folk country hybrid. I entered to start singing. He sung, "I do it for my pay." While she was staring at him, Maria missed the following line or two's words since she hadn't heard the song before and wasn't sure whether he was good. The audience seemed to be extremely into what he was singing. "With a few good friends and neighbors in to play the nighttime tunes," he said. "So pass the jar and that old guitar in this hangdog hotel room." The crowd was screaming so loud after that line that Maria couldn't hear him anymore. She wondered if he'd ad-libbed it or if the song actually went that way. There was something about the man that just appeared to draw her in and make her feel comfortable. She reluctantly turned away and left the room, though she really wanted to stay. It wasn't just the song, it was the man himself. Though he was older than Maria, she was seriously attracted to him, which shocked her. But she had no time for dalliances. Her future depended on the next few days. So, two things forced her to leave. One was the fact that she had to pee really badly, and the other was the fact that she wasn't going to find Aaron Anderson by sitting here listening to some wannabe folk singer, no matter how dreamy she found him. Sitting at her desk, Stacy Anderson gazed out over the sea. The villa was not close to the water, but it was high enough on the hill that she could see the sea from almost every room at the back of the house. Sea views were soothing to her at the moment. She detested the water, but Aaron loved it so much that she was certain he was looking out at it too. Robert was treating her so differently now, acting as though something was wrong between them. He was so conceited. Why hadn't she noticed that before? He had that smug little smile ever since they'd left the meeting, and he kept telling her to keep calling Aaron. It was hilarious, because he honestly believed that they would find Aaron and find a way to make him forgive them both, and then things would resume as normal. Only it wouldn't be the same as usual because he expected her to have slept with Aaron behind Aaron's back. His exact words had been, "What he doesn't know won't hurt him." He behaved as though she were some kind of whore, and he truly believed that she was the kind of woman who would fool around on her husband. He made it seem as though they'd share her, that she would be Robert's whore in private and Aaron's wife in public. The worst thing about it was the way he treated her. That afternoon, after that awful girl had left, he came over. Since his apartment was too small to hold all of his research materials and charts, Aaron had granted him access to their first-floor library. He had begun to look up some of the local legends and such, and had created a list of things he was interested in and could possibly find somewhere. Aaron had a way with people, so when she inquired when he planned to do that, he had informed her it was what Aaron typically did. The funniest thing about all of this was that for years Stacy had really believed that Robert was the smart one, that he was just helping out his old friend. But now she was beginning to see that her husband had more than pulled his own weight. Perhaps she'd chalked it up to the fact that she and Robert came at things from a purely academic perspective. She asked him about getting a crew together, and he told her again that Aaron usually did that too. However, what she discovered this afternoon was that, in contrast to her husband, Robert never paid attention to any of her theories or ideas. Instead of treating her as a partner, he treated her like a servant, coming over to play with her as if he owned her. This shocked Stacy at first, telling her to tell him to get off her, but then she realized that, despite how much she hated Robert now, he might come in handy if Aaron never returned. When Aaron did the same things, his touch was meant to stimulate her, to get her aroused so he could make love to her. Though he enjoyed touching her himself, he did it in a way that she enjoyed it too. Her mind recoiled at the memory of his touch. His hands did not caress her skin lovingly, he simply pawed her. It took her some time to figure out what the difference was. However, Robert didn't care if she felt anything from the touch. He was just arousing himself so that when his nuts healed, he could eventually screw her, regardless of whether she found it enjoyable or not. This wasn't a sharing between two people in love, it was just something he had to do to get off. She was aware of how foolish she felt, and she wasn't the only one. Everyone she encountered gave her the expression of being both laughing and spitting directly into her face. Her husband had always treated her as an equal, but it had been a sort of segregated equality. He had respected and welcomed her opinions and ideas, but only as an outsider. He and Robert were the company. She had been at best a concerned colleague. The worst thing about it was that she'd done it so casually. She'd never had any intention of ending her marriage. Instead of a partnership between the two friends, she'd wanted to be included. The brief fund she'd offered Robert had only been meant as a thank you for letting her be a part of things and possibly as a way to get him on her side for future endeavors. Coming to Greece and working for the university here gave them all a chance to fulfill their dreams. But things had gotten so bad that she didn't know where her husband was and that Robert saw her as his property. To make matters worse, the girl Robert had fired was somehow tracking her down for work purposes. Business, she'd said, but what kind of business could that girl have with Aaron? The doorbell rang again while Stacy was thinking over her options. But before she could hurry to the door, she realized that Aaron wouldn't have rung it because he had a key. She unlocked the door, and Robert entered immediately. She led him inside, and he reached out to hold her. Startled, she stared at him. "What's wrong, baby? Is Aaron not present here?" he inquired. "No," she answered. "It just surprised me. I think I know what we're searching for and where we want to explore," he replied. "Have you and Aaron worked things out yet? I don't even know where he slept last night, and he still hasn't returned home," Stacy added. "For the first time since our marriage, I will be spending my first night alone in bed." Robert sneered. "You don't have to go to bed alone. What if, during your visit," he returned, "he knocked you out with a single blow the last time he saw you, and he was shocked at the time?" Stacy inquired. "You most likely wouldn't be quite as fortunate this time." Robert agreed, saying, "Well, you're right. Make some calls. Find him no matter how difficult it is. However, what should I do if I locate him?" "I can't get him to come home," Stacy inquired. "I cannot get him to talk to me or come back. He won't talk to you, forgive you, or even collaborate with you. What specific action do you want me to take?" Robert remarked. "He's your husband. Figure something out." As Robert exited the house, Stacy observed. Once more, he had done it. He had informed her that he had determined the best place for them to begin their quest. However, he hadn't bothered to explain her what they were searching for or even where it was. It seemed as though her thoughts and opinions were unnoticed, and he had just reached out and taken her like if she were his to play with at will. It was rapidly becoming worse rather than better in her life. As soon as politeness permitted, Maria gave Alina a call the following morning. Having waited 3 hours to give the woman time to get up and eat breakfast, she had been up since just after 6. "Mrs. Reinhardt, are you sure I'll be able to find him at that hotel?" she inquired. "It appears quite dilapidated. It does not appear to be the type of location where a professor would congregate." "That's because he isn't a professor and he doesn't act like one," Alina said. "All you need to do is visit that location and inquire about him. By now, I'm sure that everyone there has a buddy." Maria changed into her clothes and returned to the hanging dog. Asking the woman behind the bar if they offered breakfast, she took a seat at the empty bar. The woman answered, "Of course we do. I'll have scrambled eggs and toast, with bacon or sausages," Maria replied. "And black coffee, please." The woman answered, "We don't have any of that on our breakfast menu," seeming bored. Maria inquired, "What do you have?" "We have beer," the female stated. Maria inquired, "What else do you have?" "Beer," the woman said. "We don't serve other kinds of liquor until after noon, but we do have them. After all, this is a fine restaurant." "Do you know Aaron Anderson?" Maria irritatedly inquired. "Everyone knows at AA, the bartender grinned. Maria thought the smile was a touch too wide. She feared that the bartender could know too much about the man she was trying to find. In her most exact and clipped British accent, Maria inquired, "Could you tell me where I might find him?" "He's in his room upstairs." The bartender responded, "It's number 207. But given that he had a fairly wild night before, he most likely won't wake up till later." Maria climbed the stairs to reach the second story. After arriving, she proceeded down the hallway and examined each room's number. She proceeded inside as the door was broken when she arrived at 207. She glanced around the space, seeing nothing particularly noteworthy. She was astonished when she saw the shape on the bed. The singer she'd been so enamored with the night before was Aaron Anderson. Still wearing the same clothing from the day before, he laid there partially clothed. His chest was somewhat furred and strong, with his shirt undone almost to his waist. Maria found herself curious in the appearance of the rest of him. About 3 days' worth of collected beard growth covered his face, yet it fit him. It gave the impression that his looks wasn't the most important thing to him. He could clean up, of course, if the circumstances called for it, but other than that, he was more concerned with getting the job done. Likely, he would get up, take a shower, brush his teeth, and head out into the streets. Maria cherished it. She had had enough of these guys. Maria reached out to push a stray strand of hair out of her face without even realizing she was doing it. His eyes sprang wide and he took her hand before it was even in reach. Calmly, "Why are you in my room?" he inquired. She stammered, "Th, the door was open." "But that doesn't give you the right to just come in, does it?" questioned the man. She gave a nod of her head. "I've been searching for you for a few days," she said, as though that clarified everything. "Mrs. Reinhardt suggested that I may become a research assistant and become a part of your team. I was meant to work for your partner, but before I could begin, he sacked me. He chose your wife, Dr. Anderson, to be his assistant. Nevertheless, Alina, Mrs. Reinhardt had the notion that you could also require an aide. We only have around 3 days left until the bids must be submitted, and the university will only fund 5 teams, so we must get started right away. The meeting you missed had 14 teams in attendance. There's not much time left because some of them have already sent in their bids and proposals. Together with the rest of the team, we must decide what should be included in our proposal and how much to provide for equipment and other items. He sat up in bed and Maria watched. He was still wearing his whole outfit. He was still wearing his boots, too. Evidently, after drinking or doing something else to himself, he had simply stumbled into the room last night and collapsed into the bed. It would have been as easy for him to merely fall to the ground. It troubled her, for some reason she couldn't quite put her finger on, to think that he may damage himself by tumbling to the ground. He most likely had a chill throughout the night and just wrapped the covers around himself to get warm when he woke up. He was giving her a shake of his head. "Which part are you shaking your head at?" she inquired. "Everything," he murmured softly. "None of those things are required of us. I give up. I'm returning home." Maria inquired, gesturing to the edge of the bed. "May I?" "Well, since you're extremely polite for a burglar, please do," laughed Aaron. She murmured, "Okay," as she sat gently on the side of his bed. "I was instructed to locate you and join your team by Mrs. Reinhardt herself. She had to have had a motive for telling me to do it. She appears to be aware of everything going on the entire island." Her usage of the American expletives ignited Aaron's eyes. Her voice had been sharp and precise, with a British accent that he found quite appealing. Her flawless pronunciation of the term screwing, including the G, stuck out like a sore thumb. In fact, it made him happier. "There has to be a reason why she didn't simply send me to your partner," she said. "She believes he's a jerk," Anderson remarked. "It still amazes me that I stood up for that guy the other night." Naturally, that was prior to my discovery that she was correct. "Although I've only met him once, I completely concur with Alina. He's a conceited jerk." Maria said. "I think she called him an annoying guy." "Well, she's only had to deal with him for a few days," replied Aaron. "I have known him my entire life. In addition to being my partner, he was my closest friend." Despite his best efforts, Aaron couldn't help but get fond of the plump little woman. She was hardly a woman, he realized. She was only a girl. She was no more than 24 or 25 years old. He had never seen anything as ugly as her spectacles. Even though she was smaller than the ladies he preferred, there was something alluring about her. He realized that he was itching to speak. "It didn't happen in a few days," he said. "It was a matter of minutes." He didn't stop talking until he had told her the whole tale of the evening, 3 days prior, when he had discovered Robert and Stacy together. He opened out to her, telling her how much he'd loved Stacy and how terrible it had been to lose his closest friend and her simultaneously. Losing his automobile would have been the only thing that could have been worse. "That's terrible," Maria said. "When you chatted with her, what did she say? How did she justify what she had done? Did she claim it was an isolated incident? Was she intoxicated? Was that something that she had to do? Is she in love with him? How did she say that?" "I haven't spoken to her since I caught them," he said. She questioned. "Well, what did he say?" "When I left them, he couldn't speak," Anderson grinned. His eyes glinted viciously, Maria observed. "So you just slunk off into the bushes to die after that guy took your toys away, huh?" said Maria. "After spending just a short while getting to know you, that doesn't seem like something you would do. And you're just going to throw up the towel on your profession and cry your way home." He said. "What do you think I should do?" "I'm curious, but not that I'm going to do it. You know, this isn't a reality TV show. This is how I live. Stacy and I have been wed for 9 years. It saddened me a lot to witness her acting in that way. Right now, I'm not exactly playing at my best." "Well, you have 2 options," Maria remarked. "You can return, consult with them, and decide on your next course of action. There's also a choice for you. 1, you can forgive them both, or you can take her back. Alternatively, you may just throw it all away and go on with your life. Simply do what you truly want to do." "I guess deep down inside, I love Stacy and I'd kind of like to see things work out for us," Aaron replied. "Many thanks, Maria," the woman responded. "I'm going to try to chat to Stacy immediately by heading over to the villa. If we are to remain married, she needs to provide a great deal of explanation," Aaron remarked. Aaron was washed and dressed an hour later. He climbed into his car with Maria and they headed to the villa. As they drove through the early afternoon, she was taken aback by the response the automobile received. Aaron escaped the villa as soon as they arrived. Maria promised to give him some solitude by waiting in the car. Aaron approached the front door but halted as he went past the windows in the living room. Stacy was sitting on the living room sofa. Robert Thompson was fucking her as she was laying on her back and gazing up at the ceiling. Aaron's face was flushed with rage as he observed Robert caressing Stacy in and out. It appeared as though she smiled as he planted a kiss on her cheek. "Robert, I'm okay," Stacy answered glumly. Aaron thought that was odd since when his wife blew, she typically simply shouted. And because she just lost control of her limbs, she would generally wrap herself up completely around him. Nor were her hip motions the convulsions they typically were. In any case, this was probably what she wanted. It was eye-opening to witness her screw his closest buddy. Comparatively speaking to his time with Stacy, it was more subdued and respectful. That was certainly something she enjoyed. Aaron would never be as sophisticated as she and Robert were. The moment to accept reality has come. They shared many more things than Stacy and Aaron ever would. This was the decisive factor. It wasn't only the degrees and schooling. It was only that they fit each other better than Aaron did any of them. He questioned whether she had ever truly loved him. "I apologize," a soft voice next to him whispered. Aaron turned to face Maria, who was standing beside him. It was a little too late for her to notice the tears streaming down his face as he turned away. With a serious expression on her face, Aaron said, "Okay, Maria, what do you do?" He turned back to his car after wiping his face. She raced to get to him. She questioned, "What do you mean, what do I do?" His sudden shift in attitude startled her. "If that's what you mean, I don't do what we were just looking at. I mean, I kind of do it. I mean, I don't do that with other people's." "Whoa, Maria, what I want to know is what you specialize in," he responded. He had to restate his inquiry since she was still perplexed. "In terms of work," he said. "In terms of your career, what are your interests?" "Oh," she exclaimed. "I want to be a professor of history." "Excellent," he grinned. "We just departed from the villa with 2 of those. Is it truly your intention to return there and create history with them?" "Without a doubt," she said. "I'd rather make history with you." As he glanced at her with one eyebrow raised, she realized what she had said. "You're my new researcher, all right. List all the things you will require. I'm going to check the price of renting a boat for us. You are free to begin your investigation at any moment," he stated. Before she could even finish thinking, he turned to face her faster than she could have anticipated. "Well, shouldn't we wait for them to get done and confer with? Maria, we're on our own from now on. I will never again collaborate with my ex-partner," he declared. "Additionally, I'm going to cut all ties with my ex-wife. I want the best for them, but let's move on. This is no longer about them. I'll write you a beautiful letter promoting your services if you'd want to work with them, but that's all I can do." She realized she had done it again and responded, "Nope, I'm fine with you." Simply said, "I've never really done any research on a project before. To be honest, I have never participated in a field excursion. I've only taught a small number of classes, though." Aaron responded, "Don't worry about it. Robert's study only brought us close to the ballpark about half the time. He did not have the ability to reduce the entire globe to a single region, and sometimes not even that. Naturally, he gave us a pretty good notion of what we would discover, but in this instance, it really doesn't matter what we discover, does it?" Maria inquired. "What do you mean?" "We aren't going out to look for a specific type of item," he stated. "Let's face it, because we are in Greece, we will undoubtedly come across Greek and probably Roman artifacts. That much is already known. We also know that the team that makes a discovery will be reimbursed by the university. The contract with the university for further investigation will also go to that team. That's the thing that interests me. I'll try my hardest to assist you in obtaining the professorship if that's what you desire and we succeed. However, this is essentially a race rather than just your typical field labor. Numerous archaeological excavation teams are scurrying over the ancient Greek remains. We're going to prevail, and the spoils belong to the winner." His face brightened up with a smile when he stated this. Although Maria was certain that Drs. Thompson and Anderson would be conducting considerably more in-depth study than she could and that they had at least 3 days ahead of her, she still found herself wanting to believe. He responded, "Okay, partner, get busy." He handed her a card with his mobile phone number on it and said, "Dig up any specifics you can and get a few friends who are willing to help us. They'll be paid, of course, plus they'll have the experience to put on their resumes." He drove off, leaving her in front of the hotel where she had originally discovered him, saying, "Call me if anything comes up. If not, I'll meet you back at the Hangdog this evening." With a nod, Maria turned to return to her friend's vehicle. She knew a few of her classmates who would do everything to help, and she was certain that Dana, the girl who owned the car, would want to assist. In order to update Alina on the situation, she also needed to give her a call. Aaron headed along the docks in his car. He talked for a while with a few of the folks he'd met and spent the week hanging out with. He had a crew and a boat that would be perfect for his needs in a matter of hours. He asked the boat's owner to estimate the cost of renting the vessel for a week in writing. This time, Aaron was going out without clothes. He had no intention of hiring a massive, luxurious research vessel complete with spacious bedrooms and private facilities. Robert's preferred method was always the one. Aaron's boat would be outfitted for both speed and exploration. A few computers and scanning devices for subsurface radar and underwater vision would be on board the boat. Aaron desired the ability to extensively search any location he desired. While he wouldn't cut corners on gear, he also needed to locate the quickest boat available. No additional weight for ornate woodwork or leather sofas. No plasma TVs and no movie screens. No refrigerators, convection ovens, or baths. I talked on the phone for the remainder of the day. He had many proceedings open at the same time and had made multiple calls back to the United States to talk with his attorney. Despite Stacy phoning him many times, he had not answered her calls. He had nothing to say to Robert or Maria, even though he had truly meant what he'd said about how much he wished his soon-to-be ex-wife well. After turning on the shower, Stacy got in. The last several days had been the worst of her life. Her spouse had not contacted her since the evening of the gala. Her plan to join her husband as a partner in his business had, for some reason, completely flopped. Robert was her only friend here and her only opportunity to make any sense out of this disaster, so she had to do what he asked. She was shocked to learn that she had slept with him. It had been terrible. It was worse than bad, not terrible in the slightest. It had not meant anything. All the time, Robert continued to hump her, leaving her feeling cold. A portion of it stemmed from the obvious reality that Robert lacked Erin's physical stature. Furthermore, Erin had spent the previous 9 years getting to know her preferences, so he knew exactly how to make her happy. However, Robert didn't seem to mind if she gained anything from it. Subsequently, she remained still on the bed, experiencing the sensation of being the whore her spouse had accused her of being. Was this humiliation worth boosting her career? In any case, the deadline for submitting their offers and proposals was just 1 day away. Since the boat was Erin's domain, Robert had no idea what to search for there. Furthermore, they had not been able to obtain any staff recommendations. In the end, they had hired a captain who arrived with his own men. While Robert was able to enlist the assistance of a few university students, none of them had any diving expertise. Robert was not a particularly excellent diver, but he could do it. But this time, he would have to make sure they weren't duped or taken advantage of. They were both hoping Erin would arrive. Robert believed he had some unique insights into the field and felt he had done an excellent job of investigating it. The entire ordeal had just highlighted the true extent of their bond. They were saddled with unskilled divers, an untrustworthy commander, and an unappreciative crew. Stacy, in fact, had not liked the way the guys had stared at her. She made the decision to stay onshore since she was certain that Robert wouldn't be able to defend her if things became violent. She sat on the balcony once again to watch the water as another evening drew to a close. She couldn't stop weeping this time. This was not going to work out in the way she had hoped. She desired to work in an esteemed academic setting and conduct significant research in her area of expertise, ancient history. She was now essentially the whore's partner of her husband. She may perhaps become one of Robert's helpers if she was fortunate enough. If she hadn't been so fortunate, she could have had to return home poor, devastated, without money, and jobless. One of the things she was most certain about when she came here was her marriage. She had taken a chance on that marriage in her pursuit of professional success, and she wasn't even certain it would last. Robert assured her that they would mention to Erin when he arrived that they hadn't seen or communicated with one another since the event. They would inform him that they had both begun drinking well in advance of his arrival and were both inebriated. Both of them really regretted what they had done, even if they weren't thinking clearly at the time. Both of them would ask for his pardon and make an effort to forget what had happened. Given that Erin had also been intoxicated on a few occasions and had committed some really foolish acts, it actually made some sense. Even with his extreme inebriation, she had to concede that Erin had never cheated on her, although they were surrounded by young, gorgeous college girls all the time. His inebriation had only reached that point once when he failed to secure a boat they had leased, resulting in damages worth several $1,000s as the vessel drifted off. However, it was the extent of his inebriation. Despite his size and strength, her spouse was a laid-back man who had no grudges. Stacy had no doubt that he would return to her once he had moved over his anger at her. That much was also certain for Robert. Stacy was also aware that she needed Robert or her spouse to remain in this place. Since coming here, she and Erin had discussed settling down several times. Since Papali's was the only university in the region, the dean and his spouse had developed a strong aversion against her. Whatever her qualifications, she really doubted that the dean would hire her on her own. Although she was unsure of the dean's feelings for Robert, she was certain that he had a soft spot for Erin. They had engaged in many rounds of golf throughout their initial week of stay. 2 days later, Stacy and Robert convened in the spacious ballroom of the gala together with hundreds of other attendees to await the announcement of the selected teams. The place had an anxious atmosphere. It felt quite tense just waiting for the meeting to start. Which proposals had been accepted was still a mystery. However, there were whispers that there had been an impromptu alteration to the selection procedure. Robert and Stacy took seats close to the center of the rows of chairs that were available for the guests. With a few of the students who would be working with them seated between them, they were separated from one another. They both expected and hoped that Erin would show up at the last minute. They were both a little afraid about this endeavor. For Stacy, there was a sense that things had been going wrong in her life ever since she had her first sexual encounter with Robert. Robert was just plain afraid. He had complete faith in his studies and felt that this was the toughest challenge of his career to far. Robert had to attempt to manage a plethora of minute tasks that Erin often took care of on his own. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to locate a suitable replacement for the captain and crew at such short notice. Things would have been different if Erin had been present. People liked Erin, for whatever reason. Even those who didn't like him acknowledged his power and stature. The level of confidence between the captain and his crew had further declined once they learned that Robert had been attempting to replace them. "Aaron, hurry up and enter this room, Robert. I'll give you back your whore. It's not worth it for her." Abruptly, the room became silent. When Robert looked up, he saw the dean enter the front of the room's stage. The moment he started talking, the entire room became silent. "We do this challenge every few years or whenever there's a need," stated the dean. "This year, besides the monetary benefits, we're looking to augment our staff." Robert was taken aback, since he had assumed his study was exclusive. Abruptly, Stacy reached across to tap the hand of the two kids who were separating them. She gestured to the wall on the left side of the room as he gave her a quick glance. The moment he saw where she was pointing, he felt instantly better. Not only was the dean's stunning wife leaning against the wall, but Aaron Anderson was standing right next to her, game face on. Robert had witnessed that expression on Aaron's face hundreds of times when they had their backs to the wall, and they consistently managed to get through. Robert was so delighted that he wanted to leap up and yell, but he refrained. After all, he was an expert. He and Stacy both looked at Aaron, unsure of what needed to be done to turn things around. Robert glanced back to Aaron and met his gaze. Aaron turned back to hear the dean out and gave him a little nod of his head. Robert gave a nod in return, seeing that his friend's expression was devoid of hostility. Aaron was focused only on his work. Stacy had observed her husband and Robert nodding at each other. She attempted to look him in the eye as well, but he was fixated on the dean. He appeared to pause and converse with the dean's spouse many times, and she gave him a few shoulder rubs. It didn't sit well with Stacy that the woman was touching Aaron. She might just have to tell Mrs. Reinhardt that when this meeting was done. "Remember the plan," Robert was snarled by Stacy. All he did was nod. Even though Aaron nodded to Robert, Stacy was certain that he was still furious with them, but he was here to work as a professional. He hadn't even given her a glance, indicating that even if he was open to working with Robert, he wasn't as understanding of her. He had always told her that Robert was his greatest friend, but that she was his heart, so it made sense. As per their arrangement, the person whom Aaron was willing to pardon would make every effort to mediate on behalf of the other. The dean went on, "So since the proposals were all so similar, we used different criteria for our selections. 2 of the teams were picked solely on the basis of their reputations. Dr. Thompson's team from the United States and the team led by Dr. Ishikawa from Japan and his partner Dr. Helen Chambers from England. We also picked a team comprised totally of students from our own university. The team from Germany led by Harris H. Chang was selected, and finally the team from the Netherlands led." The remainder of the dean's remarks were interrupted with groans and cheers. Abruptly, a high-pitched whistle sliced through the atmosphere. Searching for the source of the whistling, everyone peered around. Alina Reinhardt was the one. Grinning, she gestured back to her spouse who was seated on the platform. "As I was saying," the dean went on, "due to the similarity of all the proposals, we eliminated some because they were simply too expensive and some because they were ridiculous. Others we felt were simply not based on sound reasoning. But we did decide strictly on faith and reputation to allow one more team into the challenge. The team led by Aaron Anderson, who was formerly the partner of Dr. Robert Thompson. Mr. Anderson's new researcher is Dr. Maria Claridge of England, who recently graduated from our own university. One of the reasons we picked them was because the selection of Thompson and Anderson was made based on both of their reputations. With them splitting up, it was decided that it was only fair to allow them both to participate. There was also the fact that Mr. Anderson's bid was considerably cheaper than any other bid in the challenge, and that they are the only group of the selected teams who are exploring a different area. Thank you very much for your participation thus far, and good luck to those of you who are still involved." Robert was stunned. Although he was aware that Aaron was upset, this anger beyond his expectations. Since they were 6 years old, they had been buddies. They were not so much buddies as they were brothers. Aaron was regarded by Robert's mother as if he were her other son. They were related. For what lady would Aaron want to ruin that? Robert was as shocked as Stacy was. That girl who had come seeking for Aaron the previous day had to be Maria Claridge. Stacy was positive that the two of them were connected by the nosy wife of the dean. The woman's intentions for Aaron were much more apparent. Aaron was paired up with an intelligent but ugly researcher who happened to be her buddy. That way, she would have no rivals when she and Aaron did whatever she had planned. As she turned to see what Robert was thinking, she noticed that he had already started to go toward the area where Aaron and the dean's wife were still having a conversation. There was also the plump little woman. Robert was intercepted by a guy who gave him some papers, as Stacy saw. Suddenly, Robert was furious and yelling at the man, who did nothing except nod, grin, and walk away. Stacy made the decision to let Robert handle whatever was bothering him on his own. It was most likely anything to do with the project's staff or equipment. Let him handle the BS details alone too. He hadn't asked her opinion on the study, which was as much her area of expertise as his. Turning, too, Stacy faced the wall where Aaron had stood. Along with another young woman, he, Mrs. Reinhardt, and the other woman were making their way towards the exit. Compared to Dr. Claridge, this one was taller and less lumpy. She could pose a risk. Stacy saw the girl ask Aaron a question, reaching out to put her hand on his lower back. Though it seemed like a harmless gesture, Stacy was aware that a woman would often find a way to touch a guy in order to express her interest in him. The male grows accustomed to her touch as a result, and he starts to need more. More significantly, though, it communicates to nearby females that the lady is demarcating her territory. Stacy was really enraged. That small girl's daring to touch Aaron would get her destroyed. This was just pushing it too far. It was time to talk to her spouse. Robert approached her from behind. Just as he was going to say anything, a young woman abruptly moved in front of Stacy. He was furious. It's quite likely that the girl was a college student attempting to join their squad or offer to help Stacy in exchange for a reference letter or letter. Dr. Stacy Anderson, the girl said in a disinterested tone. She even had gum in her mouth. Yes, Stacy said with an even more disinterested expression. When the girl handed her the documents, she had a glance at them to see where her signature was needed. She could always take the girl on as an assistant, then let her leave when the time was right. "You've been served," the girl stated as she turned to go. Stacy was stunned. Her situation had abruptly deteriorated. She fell onto a chair that was close by. Robert was standing over her, sulking. "You are to blame for everything," he yelled. "My best friend is taking me to court to formally dissolve our company and split the assets. He has also named me in your divorce. The scandal will definitely hurt my reputation among some of the old fuddy-duddies who fund grants for academic research. You've really screwed my life up, Stacy. Thanks." Stacy said, "Robert, blow it out of yourself." Stacy bounded off in the direction Aaron had been headed, saying, "I don't give a good goddamn about your money problems. My husband is divorcing me." He had left by the time she made it outside. The distant sound of the car's exhaust system was all she could hear. Maria was preparing her boat bag with everything she anticipated needing. For some reason, she felt quite uncomfortable and irritated. It wasn't simply that I felt anxious or uncomfortable with the assignment. Actually, she was especially angry at Dana. Though she didn't really have a valid cause, she was nonetheless upset with Dana. Dana entered the room with a graceful gait. There was nothing out of the ordinary about her happiness. Dana was the happiest, most positive person Maria had ever met. Dana was unfazed by anything. Sometimes, Maria felt envious of her friend's resilience in the face of adversity. "It's going to be so much fun," Dana said. "Some of us more than others," Maria angrily said. "Some of us have to work and our careers are on the line." "Yeah, but if my career was on the line, at least I'd be lucky to have hot guys around to help me with it," Dana added with a smile. "That Professor Anderson is hot. I can't wait to be stuck in the middle of the sea with him." My comment, you will see if OP comes on top or not in the final ending later, so make sure to smash that sub button and I will see you there.